All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the lecture on Korean food today. So, in general, food plays a very important role in forming national identity and in contributing to the identity of the nation state. And this has been increasingly the case in recent times. And often is associated with the international status of that particular country. And we see this with kind of like what's called haute cuisine, or very gourmet type of food. And so there are countries that have this very proud tradition and history of their food culture for being very high level and an elite type of food. So we see this in like France or Italy, and recently in the United States. And there are all kinds of food organizations that officially recognize this very high level of gourmet style food, and we can see this reflected in things like the Michelin Guide. And this organization will go around to different countries and rate their food and rate their restaurants. And so for many different countries, the international recognition that they receive through something like the Michelin Guide is a very prestigious award, and it correlates to the international status of that particular country. So, for example, if we take Japan, where Japan has really refined their cuisine, and especially something like sushi, and you have the Michelin Guide recognizing all of these various sushi chefs as Michelin-rated chefs. So this is a real point of pride for the nation. And so we'll be talking about the history of Korean food and how this relates to national identity and international status, and how this even affects foreign relations and diplomacy. So, when we think of food as national symbols, I think you can readily see what country these types of foods represent. Obviously there are many other types of foods that you might think of, but I just kind of pulled from randomly what might initially come to mind when you think of American food. So we often think of like hot dogs and burgers and very large portions, McDonald's. When we think of other countries, or before we get to that, that's how this relates to national identity and the forming of national identity. We see that in the media, there's this correlation between food and drink and what is American. So here we have a Diet Coke ad where we have the presidents that are being represented here in this very, very quintessential American monument. And then we have over here the Budweiser ad, and the puzzle is what's red, white, and blue and known all over? Well, it's Budweiser. And here we have the United States being depicted here. So, the idea is that these are very quintessential American symbols. And then if we look at the case of Japan, obviously we have sushi, we have ramen, and these are very representative foods of the country. And in terms of these being national symbols, here we have Kirin beer and the very iconic symbol of Japan, Mount Fuji, and also the Japanese woman in her kimono, her traditional kimono. So Kirin beer is representing, very kind of traditional, authentic Japan. Here we have Japan Fiesta 2019, which is about promoting Japanese foods. And so we have these different types of represented Japanese foods, but and we know that this is immediately, visually, when we look at this is immediately Japan because of the cherry blossoms, the temple here, the Shinto, these symbols, and it's very iconically Japan. Other examples are, here we have an ad for Guinness beer, and this is one of their I think it's football, one of their football teams, and celebrating their victory. But again, this is a point of national pride. Here we have on the right side French and these various French, these breads that are representative of France. So again, how these foods represent the nation and the culture. This is really ubiquitous, and we see this promoted on just an everyday level, and we don't necessarily even pick up on these symbols and these messages, but they are everywhere, and they really pervade just our subconscious on a level that we're not even aware of. All right, so when we think of Korea, then, what is the representative, iconic Korean food? Obviously, it's kimchi. And kimchi has recently, even though it started off as this stinky, weird smelling food, it has now reached really iconic status internationally, and it has been promoted by Korea as a health food and having medicinal value. And so we see how this has been used as a cultural symbol for Korea. There are also other representative Korean dishes like bibimbap or doenjangjjigae, naengmyeon, and the barbecue, Korean barbecue, and we have seen how this has been exported to different countries, and you can find it in all different countries at Korean restaurants, and there are even very fine dining chefs that have incorporated Korean ingredients onto their menus, and so it's not unusual to go to these restaurants in the United States where they're very, high-end gourmet restaurants, but they've included like kimchi or gochujang or barbecue or, these other traditionally Korean ingredients. And kimchi has reached such a status where it's really not just a national symbol, but it's like a national event, because kimchi is traditionally made once a year, and it's a communal event. So the whole community gathers and participates in this, and then they're stored, and it's supposed to last for the year until the following year. And so although it's manufactured on a mass scale now and even imported from other countries, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it is still, there are communities that where people will gather and they'll make it together, and it's a tradition that is felt like it needs to be passed down from generation to generation, even though it's readily available in any grocery store or even convenience store. It's considered to be this tradition that everyone must at least be familiar with and aware of. And so we see school events where school children participate in making kimchi, the kimjang. And even though you don't practice it every year, at least you need to be familiar with the process and with the tradition. And this is what is authentically Korean and qualifies you as being Korean. But we're going to talk about today, how did Korean cuisine go from just, this kind of food of ill repute that was considered to be really pungent and smelly and stinky, and this is like grandma's cooking or mom's cooking. How did it go from that to just really kind of what is now often depicted as refined and this cultivation of traditional Korean cuisine, and now has even expanded and evolved into something of a cultural phenomenon that has not only spread throughout Korea, but is also being exported to other parts of the world. We have all kinds of food shows where that feature Korean chefs and Korean celebrities, and celebrity chefs have really just kind of exploded in Korea. We see this phenomenon, especially in the United States, with these celebrity chefs and the Food Network and their shows and kind of the food empires that they've created. But this is also starting to occur in Korea as well. So if we look at the history of Korean food and what we think of as traditional or very quintessential Korean food today, Korean food, it contains, what we think of Korean food is, it's usually accompanied by rice, and it includes a lot of garlic and red pepper and green onion. There are a lot of fermented vegetables, a lot of soups and side dishes, what we know as banchan. And Korean food is often identified as being very spicy. And this is because of these red peppers that go into a lot of different kinds of Korean food. Obviously kimchi, and there's gochujang, the spicy red pepper paste that you put in bibimbap. And so there's this idea that if you want to eat Korean food and enjoy Korean food, then you have to have a very high spice tolerance. There's also this idea that your Koreanness is almost equivalent to your spice tolerance and how well you can eat spicy foods. So, if you can't eat something really spicy like bibimbap, then you're not really Korean. Or if you don't eat kimchi, then you're not really Korean. And so there's this, equivalence of spice tolerance with Koreanness that we often see. But this promotion of authentic, traditional Korean food and passing down and teaching the proper preparation of traditional, authentic Korean food. We've had the proliferation of cookbooks and different associations and institutes that promote and teach authentic Korean cooking, and are recognized as state organizations or official organizations, and who go out and teach these things and promote these things. So we see this development in recent times. This has been in some way promoted by the Korean wave, or Hallyu, and in particular a drama called The Jewel in the Palace, where it featured Korean royal court food and the cooking of Korean royal court food and cooking for the king. And so this became the most popular and most watched Korean drama. And as a result of this, interest in Korean palace cooking just, increased exponentially. And so we saw restaurants and cookbooks and other shows and other things related to this that exploded onto the scene. And so we have then now this interest in, all right, what is this royal court food all about? So let's look into the history of Korean food and starting with these kinds of royal meals. And we know about royal cuisine because there are actually detailed records of what the king ate and the preparation of these meals from Gojong and other official court records. So, this is a list of at the time, what kinds of foods were prepared for the king. And when we think of royal cuisine, this is actually different from contemporary Korean cuisine now, because as I mentioned before, Korean cuisine is generally associated with food that is very spicy, but royal cuisine was not spicy, in fact, and was a little bit bland, or shingo. And this was partially because royal cuisine, it followed the philosophy of yin and yang, or yang, which is about balance. So achieving balance in the meals with the ingredients, and incorporating various concepts such as the 5 colors. So the meals should include the colors of yellow, black, white, red, and green. There's also the concept of the 5 tastes, omi, which is salty, sour, sweet, spicy, and bitter. So the meals should incorporate all of these because this is what achieves harmony and balance in the meal. And the meals are not just about enjoying the taste, but also about promoting health and enhancing medicinal values from the food. So it's really about eating for your health. And the royal meals also incorporate the Confucian philosophy of the banquet and proper dining etiquette. So, for example, the ingredients in all of the meals, they differed according to the social position of the diner. So, as we've already discussed, the Joseon dynasty was extremely hierarchical with strict social ranks and status positions, and this is even reflected in the food that you consumed. So the king, for example, his meals included 12 side dishes or 12 banchan. If you are Yangban or Jungin, then you would receive anywhere from 7 to 9 side dishes, and then commoners received only 3 side dishes. And this is where this practice or custom of banchan, the side dishes, comes from. Is this, and the ingredients. So the best ingredients from all the different provinces were sent up to the capital, and the royal chefs would then cook from these ingredients the royal meals. And so the menu would change constantly depending on which ingredients are being received from the different provinces. From generally the mountainous provinces, herbs and mushrooms were sent. From the coastal provinces, it was seafood, and from the inland provinces, it was vegetables and rice. And it was said that the king, depending on the quality of the ingredients that were being received from the different provinces, the king could determine the status of the people and the welfare of the people based on the ingredients. So if the ingredients were, a very high quality and very robust, then he knew that, okay, the people are doing well in that province. But if not, then he knew that the people were suffering. So he could tell the status and condition of the people just by eating the food without having to go and physically visit and see the people down in the province. All right, so let me move this a little bit. We have the food. We see that food plays a very important role in Joseon society, and especially the Joseon royal court, because we have food that was offered to the deceased in the mourning rites. So if the king or the queen died, then there were food offerings that were prepared in the morning and the evening, and these needed to be offered for 27 months as a means of paying respect. So this is a lot of food that needs to be prepared. This was considered to be an act of filial piety to help the chief mourner, mainly the king, to overcome the shock of the death and to eventually return to normal life. The table settings are extremely intricate. So as you can see, there's a place for everything on the table setting, and this follows the ritual, and this is in line with Confucian ideology, that there's a place for everything. And we see that the Board of Rites, they would prepare the foods for the ancestral rites and the mourning rites. This board, so there were various boards in the government, including like the Board of Rites, the Board of Taxes, the Board of Personnel, but the Board of Rites played a very important part in the government during the Joseon Dynasty because Confucian ideology was so predominant. So the Board of Rites were also responsible for attaining wines and beverages that were consumed in the palace, and for attaining medicinal foods, or like yakshik, because the king was to consume medicinal foods every day. And then during times of national mourning, there were various foods for the death of the king or the queen. There were foods that were to be placed out in the outside office and in the inner palace, and also foods placed in the binjeon, where the palace where the coffin containing the king or the queen was being stored during the royal funeral. There were also foods for the honjeon, the place where the ancestral tablet was stored until the coffin was moved to the shrine after the funeral, and there were also foods to be prepared for the royal tomb. So we see that there's a lot of food that needs to be prepared at this time for national mourning. This is a picture of Gojong's funeral, and so food plays a really essential part of these rituals, these Confucian rituals that were being practiced. And so food is really an integral part of not only the culture, but also a part of the governance. And then there's the idea of treating illness through food, yakshik dongwon. And this is, this goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. It predates the Joseon dynasty. But the idea that the healing value of foods need to be enhanced through cuisine and then consumed, because eating is really about promoting health in the body. And so, the number one ingredient that is representative of this is ginseng, or insam. And the medicinal values of ginseng, it is said that the Chinese discovered this way back in 100 BC, but it was the Koreans that perfected the cultivation of ginseng. And so this became an extremely lucrative trade item throughout Korean history, and that the Koreans used as trade, not only in international trade with China and Japan, but also in terms of diplomatic relations. So we have ginseng that plays a prominent part in Korean cuisine and Korean health therapy, but also in Korean diplomacy and Korean trade. And we see that this is the case even today in contemporary Korea. There's also a tea culture, which really reaches its height during the Goryeo dynasty, but tea culture is associated with Buddhism. So when we have the changeover from the Goryeo to the Joseon dynasty, and the Joseon dynasty adopts Confucianism as its official state ideology, we see that the tea culture declines during that time. And so as a result of this, Koreans are not as big of tea drinkers as the Chinese and the Japanese. But it's during the end of the 19th century, Gojong, who was known to be an avid coffee drinker, we see the proliferation of coffee consumption. All right, and then in the colonial period, the diet changes as a result of the Japanese influence on Korea. And so this is kind of a typical meal during the colonial period. We see that we have some kind of fish, and Koreans did not consume white rice. White rice was the majority, if not at some points all white rice during the colonial period was exported to Japan. And so the Koreans, they consumed other grains such as barley. And we have here a kind of soup, which is miso based or soybean based, and a vegetable. And this is a pickled radish, which in Korean is 단무지, but the Japanese call it takwan. And so we see the changes and the influx of Japanese style or Japanese foods and food tastes in Korea from the colonial period. So Japanese food is much sweeter than Korean food. And so we see like a slight change in taste. Like what we have here is the very first Japanese soy sauce that was imported into Korea. This is Ajinomoto soy sauce, which is brewed in a way that it is quite sweet. If you taste Japanese soy sauce and compare it with Korean soy sauce is much saltier. And then the very well-known curry, Japanese curry, and tonkatsu, or pork cutlet. These are all things that were introduced from the late 19th, early 20th century into Korea and then adopted into the Korean diet. And, we can see these all over the place now in Korea. And then when we get into post-liberation and through the Korean War, the Americans, when they come to Korea, they introduce Spam. And Spam becomes incorporated into the Korean diet. I'm sure you can recognize this. This is budae-jjigae, or I guess the English translation is military stew. But because in the 1950s, Korea was such a poor country, and many Koreans would receive foods from the American soldiers outside of the army bases, they would just put everything together in a stew. And so here we have Spam and canned beans and ramen noodles and kimchi and duck or rice cakes, and they're just all boiled together in the pot. And it used to be considered like this very vulgar type of food that you only ate if you were just very poor, but now it's been elevated to a symbol of Korean style food, and you have restaurants that specialize in budae-jjigae. So let's talk a bit about Spam. So again, Spam is really just kind of the dregs of American food, and considered to be just like all the parts of the pork or the pig that you don't want to eat, and you just blend it all together and you get Spam. But Spam has become like this very coveted food item in Korea, but not only in Korea, but places where the US military has had a presence. So we see that Spam has become incorporated into the local diet in places like Hawaii and South Korea and Guam and the Philippines. And so where we have the US military, we see that it's been incorporated, and in fact has become extremely popular amongst the local population. But as we have seen in this course, as it always happens, when a foreign element is introduced to the local culture, it becomes Koreanized, or it becomes adopted into the local culture and then changed slightly. So we have these many different types of Spam that have become Koreanized. There's Spam light, there's Spam mild, there's Spam rich cheese, there's Spam hot and spicy, because of course you have to have the spiciness. There's Spam Mara, which I've never seen before, and there's the limited edition pumpkin spice Spam. Koreans and the Japanese, they love the flavor of sweet potato too, and so sweet potato and pumpkin tends to be incorporated a lot into the local diet. And then because fried rice or 볶음밥 is very popular in the Korean diet, Spam is often included in this. And so we have the classic Spam fried rice, and then the classic Spam kimchi fried rice. And then there are other food products like the Bibigo, which is a CJ food corporation. They produce this ready to eat. You just have to pour it in a pot and boil it. This budae-jjigae, which of course includes Spam. And then you have tteokbokki, which is a kind of street food, the rice cakes, which is very spicy, also including Spam. And then you have the Spam singles, so the Spam single classic, or the onion Spam, or the gokuma, the sweet potato Spam, or the mozzarella Spam. And so these have all been adapted to local tastes, the Korean tastes. And we see this incorporation. And then also we cannot forget, when Koreans celebrate the very big holidays like the Lunar New Year or Chuseok, the Korean Thanksgiving, and they give gift sets to family members or friends or business partners. The Spam set has become this very high-end gift set that you would give. And I know that Americans find this to be hilarious, because the last thing that they would ever want to receive is Spam as a gift, but in Korea it's considered to be a really nice gift. So we see how Spam has really become a part of the Korean food culture here. And if we look at the annual sales of Spam, when it was introduced in 1986 and 1987, we have, this is Chishibok one. I don't even know what the conversion rate is, but we have it growing from, let's just say, 70 units in 1987, 10 years later to 520, to 2018, 4,110. So there's really just this astronomical growth of Spam sales in South Korea. And really reflects the Korean love for Spam. All right, other examples of the Koreanization of foreign foods. We have McDonald's here. There are many different kinds of, obviously you have like the classic burgers like the Big Mac or the Quarter Pounder, but then there's also very Korean style McDonald's burgers or McDonald's sandwiches that you only find in Korea. There's the bulgogi burger, there's this shrimp burger, and you can see like the actual shrimp here. There's this, what they call the prosperity burger, which is offered at the new year, so that, it's promoting prosperity in the new year. KFC offers different types of fried chicken. So there's, like a classic fried chicken, or this Yangnam, or it's kind of like a salty and sweet type of chicken. Here we have Pizza Hut, and the tastes have also been Koreanized. Dunkin' Donuts using Hello Kitty, because Asians love Hello Kitty. Again, another Pizza Hut with the shrimp pizza. I mean, you would never find shrimp on pizza in the United States, but it's quite common here in Korea. And the Pizza Huts also, here we have the incorporation of bulgogi, which is the marinated beef, and also they put a sweet potato paste on the pizza. That's also very popular here in Korea. Again, you would never find that in the US. Starbucks has adapted to Korean tastes, and so we have here this, again, the sweet potato taste that's incorporated here. Here it says gokuma. So we see how these American foods have come into Korea, but they've adapted and changed the menu to appeal to the Korean palate. And it's become very Koreanized because I don't think when Koreans order a bulgogi goguma pizza that they think that they're eating American food. This is like just Korean pizza, or this is just what you eat. And this pizza also includes rice here, rice pizza. So it's really almost like a fusion food that these have turned into. All right, and then we cannot discuss Korean food without discussing soju. This is like the Korean alcohol and the very symbolic Korean alcohol in this country. It really is like a national symbol, and there's so many different varieties of soju. If we look at the ads from 1998 to 2014, that very, very famous and popular Korean celebrities have been used to promote the consumption of Korean soju, and so we see these ubiquitous celebrity endorsements and the total sales of soju, and they're just, it's extremely profitable and a lucrative business. But what's interesting is that we have different sojus from the different provinces, and Jinlo or Height Jinlo tends to dominate this market. But we have this very popular drink throughout the country, and it's even gone international. So we have Height Jinlo that is also exporting soju to different countries and doing really well in their export. This also has an effect on the food culture, and food as a national symbol has also had an effect on international relations. Here we see the current U.S. ambassador with this woman who is a traditional Korean chef, and she's here also pictured with the former Korean ambassador. And so it's a way of promoting good relations between two countries, but it's also has a negative side to it, where, for example, in 2007, there were these protests that were against the Korean European Union FTAs, free trade agreements, because the pig farmers and this lobby felt that this was going to negatively affect them, and so there were wide protests in Gwanghwamun. And then even more famously, the 2008 U.S. beef protests that were against the signing of agreements of importing U.S. beef, and there were wide-scale protests in Seoul, where we had Korean beef farmers that would travel up to Seoul from all different parts of the country, and they were protesting this. And so as a result of this, now when you go into any restaurant in Korea, there's a list that will show the country of origin for all the ingredients on the menu. So they'll show like where the beef is from, where the pork is from, where the rice is from, where certain vegetables are from. And it's really about trying to promote and supporting local farmers and foods that are locally grown. So we've seen how Korea has gone from the Joseon Dynasty, this largely agricultural economy, to through the colonial period, and as it has progressed and industrialized in modern times, even though we have these large conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai and SK that dominate the Korean economy, we do still see that there is now recently a move to try to promote and support locally grown and local agriculture, local foods, local restaurants, traditional, what is considered to be traditional and authentic. There's also been a backlash to kimchi that is made outside of Korea, like in China, and then imported into Korea. And so there's been an effort to support local kimchi, and it's a point of pride, but it's also about economics. And we see how food has really played an important part on a variety of levels in Korea, from the Joseon Dynasty to the present. All right, so I will see you in discussion.